Spring 1984, Washington, D.C. In a quiet corner of a D.C. newsroom, investigative columnist Jack Anderson holds a manila envelope marked confidential. Inside are documents detailing a bizarre Defense Department program. Anderson's eyebrows raise as he scans phrases like remote viewing, psychic research, and code names Grill Flame and Center Lane. He realizes he's stumbled onto something explosive. The U.S. military has been funding psychic spying experiments. With a mix of astonishment and determination, Anderson starts typing up his column. The next morning, over eggs and coffee, members of Congress and ordinary citizens alike read the headlines: Pentagon Psychic Spy Unit Exposed. The reaction is swift and often scathing. Late-night comedians joke about uniformed fortune tellers at the Pentagon. Skeptics within the government, who long harbored doubts, seize the moment. At the National Academy of Sciences, a special panel of scholars convenes to review the evidence for psychic phenomena in intelligence. Their conclusion is harsh. The results are no better than guesswork, they say, and any apparent successes can be explained by chance or subtle cues. The prestigious National Research Council issues an unfavorable report, essentially calling the psychic program a dead end and an embarrassment. Over at Fort Meade, the atmosphere in the unit turns grim. The remote viewers arrive to work under a cloud of uncertainty. Some fear that every phone call might be the one shutting them down. Major Atwater gathers his team in the briefing room, a dozen chairs squeezed around a table strewn with session sketches and coordinates. He speaks carefully. We've been officially renamed as Project Center Lane. It's a bureaucratic shuffle to distance the effort from the now tainted Grill Flame name. But the viewers know a rebrand might not save them. Atwater doesn't mention the obvious. Funding is in jeopardy, and the Army's top brass are skittish. General Stubblebine, the unit's patron, finds his credibility dwindling. In meetings, fellow generals question his judgment. Whispers circulate that he's gone too far with the spoon-bending and wall-walking ideas. Not long after, Stubblebine is encouraged to take an early retirement. He leaves quietly, and a new commander, General Harry Soyster, takes over. A man known to be a straight-arrow traditionalist with little patience for the paranormal. Inside the Fort Meade unit, Soyster's arrival is the equivalent of a cold wind. One of his first acts is to pull the plug on the Army's involvement. By late 1985, official Army funding for Project Center Lane is terminated. The psychic spies of Fort Meade receive word that their unit is to be disbanded. In a somber scene, the members of the team pack away files and equipment. One remote viewer thumbs through his worn sketch pad, page after page of drawings from visions that few outside of these walls will ever see or take seriously. A civilian secretary gathers the last of the coordinate request sheets and burns them in a shred bin, as protocol demands at shutdown. It feels like an abrupt and unceremonious end. After years of giving glimpses into hidden corners of the world, the small band of psychic spies is being scattered. Some will return to regular intelligence posts, others will retire or move on. But this strange saga isn't over yet. In a quiet conference room at the Pentagon, a Defense Intelligence Agency official flips through the closing report of Project Center Lane. He's intrigued. The DIA, which provides intel for all branches, sees potential where the Army saw only headaches. Within weeks, select key personnel from the old unit receive new orders. They're not being fired. Instead, they're being reassigned. A fresh funding stream is arranged, tucked under a highly classified technology account. The program is simply moving to a new owner and a new name. In 1986, under the codename Sunstreak, the Psychic Spy Unit finds a refuge at the Defense Intelligence Agency. The work will continue, but deeper in the shadows than ever. The public controversy forces a new level of secrecy. Now, even fewer people know the program exists, and those within it feel a renewed pressure to prove their worth. They've survived the firing squad of ridicule, barely, and have been given a second chance. It's time to deliver results, or the next shutdown will be permanent. As one chapter closes, another begins with a covert memo circulating through DIA channels. Sunstreak is now operational. The memo is signed by a rising intelligence figure, Lieutenant General James Clapper, who oversees the program's integration. Years later, Clapper will become Director of National Intelligence, but in 1986 he's one of the few willing to keep the psychic flame lit, at least for a little while longer. (1988), an undisclosed location in Maryland. The Sunstreak team operates from a windowless office tucked behind a legitimate DIA branch. The sign on their door is deliberately bland, DT-S Analytical Group. Inside, the work is as strange and fascinating as ever. The remote viewers, a mix of holdovers from the Army days and a few new recruits, continue honing their craft. They use refined methods now, including a structured approach called coordinate remote viewing that Ingo Swann and others helped devise to impose discipline on the psychic process. The viewers enter a session with pen, paper, and a set of stages to follow. Sensory impressions, dimensional analysis, sketches. It's part art, part science experiment, and part intelligence gathering. The pace of assignments has slowed but not stopped. If anything, the targets have become even more challenging. March 1986. U.S. warplanes prepare to strike Libya in retaliation for terrorist attacks linked to Muammar Gaddafi. Intelligence officers are desperate to know where Gaddafi might be hiding to avoid the bombs. In a last-ditch effort, a Sunstreak remote viewer is asked, "Where is Libya's leader tonight?" The viewer closes his eyes and envisions an old desert road, a safe house, maybe near Tripoli, or is it Benghazi? The impressions are murky. The airstrike mission proceeds regardless. Gaddafi survives, location unknown. It's a miss for the psychic team, a reminder that their insights are far from guaranteed. By 1990, Project Sunstreak has survived a gauntlet of skeptics and budget hawks. The team remains small, typically only a half-dozen viewers and a few support staff at any given time. One of the chief scientists guiding the research is now Dr. Edwin May, a physicist who has taken up where Puthoff and Targ left off. May is methodical and careful with claims. He knows their work needs to withstand scientific scrutiny if it ever sees daylight. Under his guidance, the program quietly contracts with a private company, Science Applications International Corporation, to continue experiments. SAIC's involvement is meant to lend more rigor and perhaps a layer of deniability. Most of the data and session results are locked away, seen by only a handful of analysts who struggle to figure out how to use this psychic intelligence. The world is changing rapidly. The Cold War is ending. The Berlin Wall falls. The Soviet Union crumbles. A project born from the Soviet threat now finds itself without its original adversary, but new challenges arise. In 1991, as the Gulf War erupts, rumors swirl that the remote viewers are tasked to locate Iraqi Scud missile launchers or even Saddam Hussein himself. One viewer later hints that they attempted to zero in on a tall man with a mustache in a bunker, a clear nod to Hussein, but with what result, we don't know. If any hits came out of those sessions, they remain classified. Despite operating in the shadows, the program's existence isn't entirely forgotten. A handful of journalists and curious members of Congress still remember the 1984 revelations. Every so often, a question pops up in a budget meeting. Are we still funding that psychic program? The official answer is usually a curt denial or deflection. Internally, the DIA justifies Sunstreak with cautious language, experimental intelligence support, or low-cost exploratory research. At $500,000 or so per year, the budget is a rounding error in the vast defense spending, but it's enough to keep the lights on and the psychics busy. 1991. A decision is made to streamline all these efforts under one banner. The assorted code names, Grillflame, Centerlane, Sunstreak, and others have caused confusion. Under General Clapper's oversight at DIA, the program is consolidated and given a new, memorable codename, Stargate. The term Stargate evokes opening a door to the unknown, a fitting metaphor for this venture into the paranormal. With the new name comes a slight easing of security. The project's classification is downgraded from the ultra-secret Special Access Program to a still secret but slightly more accessible level. This hints that maybe, just maybe, the Pentagon is considering letting more of the intel community give Stargate's methods a try. In practice, Stargate in the early 90s carries on much like before. The core team remains at Fort Meade. They run practice sessions to keep their skills sharp, often with outlandish targets to test their range. One day it might be describing the rings of Saturn or an ancient historical event. On operational days, they focus on current problems, a missing Marine in the Balkans, the location of a new North Korean nuclear facility, or a possible terror plot in Europe. The viewers often don't know the context of what they're looking for. They're just handed a number or a sealed envelope as a target reference. They do their thing, turn in their drawings and notes, and analysts elsewhere try to piece together if it matches any real-world facts. By now, several of the original personalities have moved on. Skip Atwater retired from the Army and went to explore consciousness studies in the private sector. Others like Mel Riley also retired quietly. Newer blood steps in, like Paul Smith, Lynn Buchanan, and Angela Ford, who each bring their own style to remote viewing. They've also started training protocols, believing that average people can be taught to remote view with practice. The idea is to create a stable of psychic operatives who can be called upon when needed. Yet, for all the training and theory, the results remain inconsistent. Sometimes a session produces nothing useful at all. Other times it yields a jaw-dropping detail that analysts verify later. It's a roller coaster of hit and miss, which makes some at DIA uneasy about relying on it. Still, the very existence of Project Stargate into the 1990s is a testament to the persistence of a few believers in the defense and intelligence establishment. They've weathered ridicule, reorganizations, and relentless doubt. They've kept the flame alive that something extraordinary might be possible, that the human mind might access distant truths. But as the mid-90s approach, a final test looms. The US government is re-evaluating all its Cold War-era programs, and a skeptical eye is turning once more towards the psychics at Fort Meade. This time, the judgment will be definitive. (1995) Langley, Virginia. In a secure conference room at CIA headquarters, a small panel of experts convenes to evaluate Project Stargate. This is the American Institutes for Research Review, commissioned by the CIA at Congress's direction. The panel includes outsiders with no stake in the program, a renowned statistics professor, Dr. Jessica Utz, known for open-minded analysis of psychic data, and a highly skeptical psychologist, Dr. Ray Hyman, famous for debunking paranormal claims. Also present are CIA officers and a few Pentagon liaisons. Over several days, they pore over 2 decades of reports, transcripts, and case studies from the psychic spy files. At one end of the table sits Dr. Edwin May, Stargate's leading scientist, called in to answer questions. He spent years cataloging every hit, miss, and maybe in remote viewing. Now he faces a battery of polite but pointed inquiries. Did any of these remote viewing sessions directly lead to actionable intelligence? How do we know viewers weren't cued or using prior knowledge? Why were protocols sometimes changed or loosened? May does his best to defend the work. There were statistically significant results in controlled tests, he explains. Some description of targets were far beyond lucky guesses. He cites the case of a viewer accurately sketching a windmill farm in a remote footbridge when tested, details that couldn't have been known. Dr. Utz nods. She too sees evidence that something is happening beyond chance. But Dr. Hyman isn't convinced. He leans forward, tapping a stack of session drawings that look vague and scattershot. This isn't actionable intelligence, he argues. The few hits, bound to occur if you record thousands of statements. Chance will produce some apparent matches. He points out that often the remote viewing reports were so general that an analyst could interpret them to fit many situations. Show me one enemy plan we foiled specifically because of a psychic vision, he challenges. The room falls quiet. No one can produce a clear-cut example. There are intriguing anecdotes, yes, like the hostage in Iran described in detail, the Soviet plane found, the fugitive's location, but each of those can be attributed partly to other intelligence or could be coincidence. After intense deliberation, the panel drafts their conclusions. The findings are a mixed bag, but the weight leans negative. They acknowledge a statistically significant event in the laboratory data, implying that remote viewing might be picking up something real on occasion. However, they find no evidence that this phenomenon has ever been useful in an operational sense. The remote viewing information is too vague, too unreliable, and too inconsistent to act upon in real-world intelligence scenarios. The origin of whatever psychic effect might exist remains mysterious and unproven, they note, and the problem of interjudge reliability is a major issue. In plainer terms, the verdict is, Project Stargate has not provided any actionable intelligence in 23 years. And with that, the CIA has the cover it needs to do what many skeptics have wanted them to do for a long time. The decision comes swiftly. Shut it down. In the summer of 1995, Stargate's remaining staff, by now just a trio of full-time remote viewers and a few support personnel, received the orders. The program is to be canceled and declassified. One September morning, the last operational remote viewing session takes place at Fort Meade. It's an odd target, something about locating a weapons cache in Asia, and the viewer knows even as he writes down impressions that it might end up in a file no one will ever read. When he finishes, he quietly packs his few personal books into a cardboard box. Down the hall, a secretary covers machines and locks file cabinets for the last time. There's a palpable sadness among the team, but also a sense of relief. They had been laboring under skepticism and secrecy for years. Now it's over. They will blend back into normal life, some taking analyst jobs at other units, some retiring from government work altogether. In a final meeting, a DIA official thanks the group for their service. It's brief. No medals, no grand speeches. After all, almost everything they did was classified. One viewer, feeling emotional, asks pointedly, "What will happen to all our work?" The official replies, "It'll be archived. Others can study it now." For the first time, the men and women of Stargate realize that the veil of total secrecy is lifting. The world might actually hear about them, but will anyone believe it? Not long after, news outlets report on the program's cancellation. The story makes for tantalizing headlines. CIA admits using psychics. Pentagon psychic spy program bites the dust. Briefing officers confirmed to reporters that about $20 million was spent over 2 decades on these ESP experiments. A CIA spokesman, a bit defensively, notes that the program was inherited from the Army and that the CIA's own earlier tests in the 1970s had deemed it unpromising. In interviews, Dr. Hyman reiterates his stance that no useful intelligence came of it. Dr. Utz counters in her academic circles that the statistical evidence for psychic functioning was strong and warranted continued research. The debate flickers in the media, then largely subsides, overtaken by other news of the day. For the people who lived it, however, Project Stargate's end is a bittersweet milestone. Major Ed Dames, now out of the unit, goes on radio shows hinting at the wild things he saw, from secret Soviet bases to UFOs. Joe McMoneagle, remote viewer number 001, writes a book describing some of the astonishing hits he believes he had, like describing a new class of Soviet submarines psychically. Others, like Paul Smith and Lynn Buchanan, begin teaching remote viewing techniques to curious civilians, ensuring that the knowledge and lore of Stargate won't disappear entirely. Project Stargate officially closed in 1995, but its legacy would slowly come out from the shadows. In the years that followed, thousands of pages of formerly classified documents were released, allowing the public a glimpse into this strange endeavor. The story inspired books, documentaries, and even a Hollywood movie thinly veiled as fiction. It remains a fascinating chapter in U.S. intelligence history, a story of scientists and soldiers, skeptics and psychics, all caught up in the pursuit of what lies beyond the veil of the known. In the end, the Stargate program asked a profound question that still intrigues us. Can the human mind transcend its physical limits to gather truth? The U.S. government's answer, after 23 years, was a resounding, not reliably enough. But for those who were a part of it, the mystery of what they experienced, the startling visions and uncanny coincidences lingers. Project Stargate closed its doors, but it left behind a story that blurs the line between fact and the fantastic, a reminder of how far we're willing to go when fear and curiosity collide on the frontiers of science.